Let's bring in Alaska Republican Senator Dan Sullivan. He's on the Armed Services Committee. Senator, thanks for being here.
Great to be here, Brett. Thank you.
First of all, let's start out with this. Is it fair to say that there is bipartisan unity when it comes to supporting Ukraine up on Capitol Hill?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, look, there's some differences on some elements of the sanctions. You're seeing a lot of senators, both Republicans and Democrats, push the administration on some key areas with regard to, for example, oil and gas sanctions on the Russians. But they were listening. Now we're doing the same on the MiG-29s, and we'll see if they listen on that. But overall, I think there's pretty strong bipartisan support on this brutal invasion by the dictator Putin. But
do you think, for example, the MiG-29s would make a difference on the battlefield for the Ukrainians?
Well, I think, you know, the beginning of this discussion came when President Zelensky requested this in a Zoom meeting with a number of senators just the past weekend. And from my perspective, different weapon systems bring different capabilities. And what we need to do is not have a no-fly zone that we impose, but to give the Ukrainians the ability to impose a no-fly zone and to get them as many different weapon system capabilities, including MiG-29s, but also Stingers, also surface-to-air missiles. That's the way in which we do it. So there is a capability that the MiG-29 has, and I think the administration needs to get there. There's a bipartisan group of senators growing that is calling for this.
Yeah, and this whole thing about this, there's a line. President Biden said, make no mistake, folks, this is World War III, and this is the line. Do you see that?
Well, look, I actually agree with what the president is doing in terms of saying we need to bolster our NATO allies. By the way, it should be not just U.S. troops, but other NATO troops on the eastern flank in NATO territories, NATO countries like the Baltics and Poland. And I think that's the point he's making. I do think that bringing U.S. troops into Ukraine is not supported by anybody really in the Senate, in the Congress. But the key issue from my view, Brett, is to make sure that we're providing as much lethal weapons as they need. And sometimes this administration has been hesitant, and that's where they're getting pushed by the Congress.
You're a Marine, reservist. You actually still serve in Asia when you're called up. China and how this administration reads China and this relationship between China and Russia. Do we fully understand how close it is or what exactly is happening?
Well, I think it's going to be closer, but I think one of the most important things of this invasion of Ukraine is it's a clarifying moment. I mean, we are in a new era of authoritarian aggression led by the dictator Putin, but also, importantly, the dictator in Beijing, Xi Jinping. And these countries, these two dictators, are increasingly working together. I think we're going to see more of that soon. You know, China's been putting on this notion of neutrality. I think it's going to be pretty clear soon that they're more of a co-conspirator in Ukraine. They're driven by historical grievances. They're driven by the desire to break up American alliances. They're driven by the desire to shut down democratic countries on their flanks, Ukraine or Taiwan. And we need to be ready for this new era, Brett. I think it's going to be with us for years. Decades. We got to face it with strategic resolve and confidence.
There was a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing where you had the U.S. Indo-Pacific commander talking about the possible aggression by China and Taiwan. Take a listen.
Most of the nations in the region have the same view. The change in the international world order is at risk. There's economic impacts as 2/3 of the global flow of trade flows through that region in the maritime domain. There's expansive second, third order effects that would be concerning.
So today, is Taiwan more vulnerable?
Look, you know, my first deployment as a Marine was to the Taiwan Strait. And during a very vulnerable period when the Chinese military was threatening to invade Taiwan, that was 95 and 96, on the eve of the first presidential election in Taiwan. I think that the opportunity that Xi Jinping might take with regard to an invasion has increased. You know, last year, the Indo-PACOM commander, Admiral Davidson, he said that he thought this would happen within 6 years. Well, that was a year ago. So that's now 5 years. So I think Admiral Aquilino's doing a great job. I'm out there, as you mentioned, as a reservist. I watch and I'm participating in the readiness of our forces. They're getting ready, but I think this Ukrainian incursion, this Ukrainian invasion, I think it actually ups the risks.
Yeah. I want to play this soundbite from President Biden. You're from an energy-producing state of Alaska. Take a listen.
You know, the Republicans saying it's Biden's gas pipeline. Biden said he's going to stop the Keystone Pipeline, and I did. And that's the reason prices went up. Folks, let's get something straight here. The Keystone Pipeline was 2 years away and had been 2% finished. Give me a break.
How do you answer that?
I say give me a break, Mr. President. I mean, this administration from day one, I've seen it in Alaska, has come into office and has been focused on shutting down the production of American energy. They do it all the time in my state. I see it all the time. Now they're trying to backpedal because this inflation, a lot of it has been driven by the Biden administration's energy policies. And back to this broader issue with regard to Russia and China, you know, one of our greatest strategic strengths is our natural resources and energy. And it's just national security suicide, in my view, to want to shut down the production of American energy. That is exactly what they've been doing. It hurts working families with regard to price at the pump. It's laid off workers. Keystone, President mentioned it, that laid off 10,000 workers, Brett. But it's also been empowering our adversaries. And the notion that now the Biden administration has said they're going to go out and beg for more oil from Venezuela and Iran. This is nuts. We need to produce more energy back at home in Alaska and other places in the country.
And that argument's going to continue. I should point out that you and I know each other from a long time. I covered the Pentagon 2001 on. This is in Iraq when you were a major. I was a few weight classes, and I don't know what was happening on that helicopter, but it's been a long time.
Been a long time. Good to see you again, though.
Thank you, Senator.